Todd let out an annoyed sigh, his expression full of frustration as he tossed the scrapbook onto the table like it was nothing more than a pile of useless paper. Useless, he muttered under his breath, shaking his head as if he couldn't believe I had wasted my time on it. I sat there, my hands clasped tightly in my lap, feeling the sting of his words settle in my chest like a heavy weight. I had spent weeks putting that scrapbook together, carefully picking out the perfect pictures, writing heartfelt notes, and piecing together memories that I thought meant something to both of us. "What is this supposed to be?" he asked, waving a dismissive hand at my creation. "A bunch of pictures and sentimental garbage? This is the best you could come up with? God, Lydia, you're ridiculous." I swallowed hard, willing myself to stay calm. "I thought you'd appreciate something meaningful," I said softly. "It's a collection of everything we've been through together." Todd rolled his eyes and let out a bitter laugh. "Everything we've been through? Please, I'm tired of all this overly emotional crap. You could have gotten me something actually useful, but instead, you wasted time on this nonsense. It's embarrassing." I felt my fingers dig into my palms as I tried to control the emotions bubbling inside me. I had worked so hard on that scrapbook, pouring my heart into every little detail, and yet, to him, it was nothing more than a joke. "Todd, I started, but he cut me off before I could finish." "No," he said sharply, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "You just don't get it, do you? This isn't working anymore. You're not working anymore. I need someone who actually adds value to my life, not someone who drags me down with these pathetic attempts to be thoughtful." My stomach twisted, and I suddenly felt cold. "What are you saying?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. Todd smirked, crossing his arms over his chest. "I'm leaving, Lydia. I've met someone else. Her name's Mara. She's 20, exciting, and actually knows how to have fun, unlike you." His words hit me like a punch to the gut, knocking the air from my lungs, but I refused to let him see how much he had hurt me. Instead, I took a slow, steady breath and forced myself to remain calm. "And you think this is the right way to tell me?" I asked, my voice trembling but firm. "After I put my heart into this?" He let out a cruel laugh. "Your heart, that's the problem, Lydia. You're all heart and no substance. I deserve more." For a moment, I just sat there, his words echoing in my head, and then, to my own surprise, I started to laugh. It wasn't a bitter or forced laugh. It was real, loud, and it cut through the tension in the room like a knife. Todd frowned, narrowing his eyes. "What's so funny?" I stood up, still laughing, and reached for the scrapbook. "You don't even know what you're walking away from," I said, flipping to the last page. His brow furrowed. "What are you talking about?" I pulled out the folded deed tucked inside and held it up. The deed to a vacation house I bought for us. I was going to surprise you tonight, but I guess that's off the table now." Todd's jaw dropped. You bought a vacation house?" I smiled sweetly, slipping the deed into my purse. "Looks like Mara won't be enjoying that, will she?" For the first time that evening, Todd was speechless, his smug confidence shattered, and his face twisted with disbelief and panic. "You bought a house?" he finally stammered. "Since when do you make decisions like that?" I tilted my head, my smile never wavering. "Since I realized I can't depend on you for anything meaningful. While you were off chasing a thrill, I was building a future for us. Silly me for thinking we wanted the same things." He opened his mouth to argue but quickly shut it, his eyes darting to the scrapbook still lying on the table. He looked like he was trying to figure out how this had all slipped through his fingers. "You're overreacting," he said finally, but his voice lacked confidence. "This doesn't change anything. Mara and you?" I cut him off, shaking my head. "Todd, I don't care. Take her, take your exciting life and get out of mine." I walked into the bedroom we once shared, listening to his weak attempts to salvage the situation as I packed an overnight bag. As I glanced around the room, my eyes landed on the framed pictures of our life together, our wedding day, vacations, holidays, moments that had once meant the world to me. Now, they just felt like remnants of a story that no longer belonged to me. By the time I returned, Todd was standing by the door, his arms crossed, still trying to look composed. "You're really just going to leave?" he asked. "I am," I said simply, brushing past him. "You'll regret this," he snapped. I paused at the door, turning back to face him. "Maybe, but at least I won't regret staying in a marriage where I'm nothing but a punchline to you." With that, I stepped outside. The night air was cool against my face. For the first time in years, I felt free. As I drove away, I realized I wasn't just leaving with my belongings, I was leaving with something far more valuable, the knowledge that I deserved better. Let Todd have his fun. I was done being the loyal wife in his selfish little game. I had hired her that very morning, and I knew it wouldn't be long before Todd would be hearing from her. His jaw tightened, his frustration barely hidden beneath the surface, but even now, he couldn't resist throwing one last insult my way. "You're being ridiculous, Lydia. You can't handle life without me." I let out a faint smile, not because his words hurt me, but because they didn't, not anymore. "We'll see about that," I said calmly. "Now, get off my porch." For the first time, I saw hesitation flicker across his face, as if he suddenly realized I was serious, but he didn't say another word. Instead, he grabbed his suitcase, turned on his heel, and walked away. The next 2 weeks felt like breathing fresh air after years of being trapped in a suffocating room. The house was quieter, cleaner, too, without Todd's mess, without his bad energy looming over every interaction. It finally felt like a home instead of a battlefield. I kept myself busy. I poured my energy into my job, met up with old friends I had drifted away from, and leaned heavily on Grace, my best friend. She had been my biggest supporter through it all, and the joy in her voice when I told her I had finally kicked Todd out was unmistakable. "Good riddance," she had said, clinking her glass against mine when we went out to celebrate. "He was a leech, Lydia. You're so much better off without him." I knew she was right. I had spent years making excuses for him, believing his lies, letting his words chip away at my confidence, but there were still moments, usually late at night, when everything was quiet, where doubt crept in. Had I done the right thing? What if I ended up regretting it? But those thoughts never lingered for long, especially after I got an unexpected call from Todd. "Lydia," he said, his voice tight, edged with frustration, "we need to talk." I sighed, already tired of whatever nonsense he was about to say. "What do you want, Todd?" "It's Mara," he admitted, bitterness dripping from his words. "She's gone." A slow smirk tugged at my lips. "Oh, is that so?" She laughed at me. He blurted, as though he still couldn't believe it. "She said I was pathetic, that I threw away the best thing I ever had. She couldn't believe I let you keep the house." I could almost picture the scene in my head, Todd, standing there stunned as Mara tossed her hair over her shoulder and walked away without a second thought. "Ah, the house. I'm sure that stung." "She said I was an idiot," he continued, completely ignoring my sarcasm, "a complete loser for losing everything you worked for, and then she just left." It was almost too satisfying. The man who had dismissed me, belittled me, and thought he could trade me in for someone younger was now facing the consequences of his own choices. "And now you're calling me because?" I asked, my voice cool, controlled. "Because I made a mistake," he admitted, his voice quieter now, almost pleading. "A huge mistake. Can we talk, please?" I shook my head, though he couldn't see it. "No, Todd, we have nothing to talk about. You made your bed, now lie in it." Before he could respond, I ended the call. I stared at my phone for a moment, then set it down, feeling a deep sense of relief wash over me. For the first time in years, Todd's problems were no longer mine to solve. His mistakes were his own, and I was finally free. The divorce moved faster than I expected. My lawyer helped me organize everything, my finances, my assets, all the necessary paperwork, to make sure I was protected. I sat in her office a few weeks later, reviewing the final documents, a strange mix of emotions settling in my chest. "Everything looks solid," she assured me, flipping through the pages. "Todd doesn't have much leverage here. He hasn't contested anything, which tells me he knows he doesn't have a leg to stand on." I nodded, a small smile forming on my lips. "I think he finally realized I'm not the pushover he thought I was." She chuckled. "I'd say you've made that very clear." Walking out of her office that afternoon, I felt lighter than I had in years. The weight I had been carrying, the stress, the fear, the constant walking on eggshells, was gone. The paperwork was filed, my future was secure, and Todd was officially out of my life. That night, Grace came over, a bottle of wine in hand, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "To Lydia," she said, raising her glass, "the woman who finally kicked Todd to the curb and took back her life." I laughed, clinking my glass against hers. "And to Grace, the best friend who never once said, "I told you so." Not yet, anyway, she teased, taking a sip. We spent the evening talking and laughing, going over everything, my plans, her latest adventures, and, of course, Todd's spectacular fall from grace. "So," Grace asked, leaning back on my couch with a smirk, "do you think he's still crying over Mara?" "Probably," I admitted, grinning, "but it's not like he has much else going for him. No wife, no house, no mistress. Honestly, I almost feel bad for him." "Almost," Grace echoed, laughing. Later that night, after she left, I sat alone in my quiet, peaceful home, thinking about everything that had happened. The old me, the one who had constantly sought Todd's approval, who had given up pieces of herself to keep him happy, felt like a stranger now. The woman I was becoming, the one who could stand her ground and find joy in her freedom, was someone I was proud of. Todd had underestimated me. But I never had.